In the budget presented on Sunday, infrastructure is the cornerstone for India's economic progress, with clearly for Viksit Bharat 2047, that's a very, very important area. To unravel in terms of what lies ahead for us, we have with us, Sandeep Upadhyay, MD for our infrastructure group for Centrum Group. We would like to understand from you, Sandeep, what is the big picture that has been presented in this budget, especially with respect to infrastructure?
Thank you, Santosh, for having me on the show. I think the big picture is that we have a sustained growth narrative which has been created over, I think, the last 10 years or so. Factually, if you just look at where we stand in terms of our commitment to essentially draw further growth as an economy, infrastructure plays a major role. Over the last 10 years, what we have done is the capex commitments which have happened through the budgetary provisions have almost increased by 5 times. So where it was close to 2 lakh crores in 14-15 when the current Modi government came to power, we've increased it by 5 times. Given that India is poised to become now the third largest economy very soon, I think we are doing good in terms of a sustained growth. The other part, of course, is how have we grown year on year. It seems that year on year, the capex commitments have been modest. But to look at the impact of some of these core sectors, I think one has to have a longer term horizon that should be taken into account.
So, the most important thing for large projects on infrastructure is funding, and that is always a challenge. So, do we have anything different in this budget in terms of how do we fund all this? Where will the money come from?
Sure. See, large part of the dependence when it comes to funding the infrastructure projects is dependent on the banks. That is like the spinal cord that we have for funding the capex. The two parts which have to be taken into account is the capex which is done on behalf of the government, and that exchequer, the capex that is happening on the government's exchequer has been expanding. What really will drive growth and which will create that delta factor is the ability to pull the private sector participation in the infrastructure when it comes to doing further capex. That is where I think the government has been trying to come out with very progressive policies. Over the last 5 years, there's a lot that has been done, not just in terms of expanding the depth and the breadth of some of these financing instruments. The recent announcement largely was in terms of deepening the bond market. We've also seen over the last 4 to 5 years new areas like InvITs really coming into picture and playing a major role in terms of asset monetization. Apart from this, there was also an announcement for the infrastructure risk credit guarantee, which I think is a game changer. For the first time, government has latched onto this theme. And I think this particular initiative can have long-drawn positive consequences.
Okay. You want to expand on this? How is it going to really help fund the large projects as compared to what it was earlier as such? A little more, because this seems to be very, very critical.
Yeah. So while the final prints are still awaited, Santosh, I think what will happen or what I see happening now is that one will, as private developers, one will be able to latch on to larger or longer tenors, so to say. Infrastructure projects typically are characterized by long gestation. What was really missing out was the ability of private sector leveraging loan or taking debt from financial institutions and bank for a relatively longer period of time. So through this guarantee fund, of course, we can obviously expect a longer horizon. The second and I think the most important part will be also to lower the cost of borrowing. So when you borrow for these projects which have to be funded for 15, 20 years or maybe even beyond, even a saving of about 0.5% or 1% can bump up your equity IRRs by 2 to 3%. Now with these credit guarantees being offered, I think one can also look at lowering the borrowing cost, improving the project viability. So of course you can expect higher project IRRs, higher equity IRRs rather. And I think third and the most important aspect will also be the financing, which can be done on behalf of large pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. As you are aware, large part of the infrastructure assets are now owned by the sovereign wealth funds or the pension funds. And they don't really have the ability of giving a corporate guarantee. They don't really have the mandate to give any such guarantee. That is where I think such financing instruments can play a major role in terms of making the financing more efficient.
So, so there is a saying that 1 rupee spent on infrastructure, there is a multiplier of 3 for the economy as a whole.
Yeah.
Does it really happen, or it's just in theory?
As per economics, yes, the range is 3.5 to 4, and the maths is pretty simple. For India to sustain a 7 to 8% GDP growth, one will have to continue to spend, a similar 3.5 to 4% of the GDP going into the infrastructure budget. Currently, we are little short of that, but the multiplier effect is definitely not a myth. It is a truth, because infrastructure and construction industry definitely leads to a lot of job creation, and it does have a multiplier effect, as you rightly said.
So now let's come to what the question which everybody has: execution part. See, large infrastructure projects, there is a dependency on state also because of lot of land acquisition, etc., which are there with the states. How smoothly would the acquisition or whatever the roadblocks which can come for implementation? Are we on line with international standards, or there is lots which needs to be done over there?
Well, very pertinent question. I think this has always been the most debatable part. How do we improve the coordination between the state and the central agencies? Because most of these projects will require, that kind of an interface. I would not say that we have reached there, in terms of really making it very efficient. We still have huge gaps. But recent initiatives, including the Gati Shakti initiative, which the government of India has, essentially takes into account a lot of these overlays which are required. I think there is a lot of scope of improvement there when it comes to coordination. Large part of the projects which have been languishing, and this has not been a phenomenon that we have seen recently. I think it has been there even 10 years back or 15 years back, right from the land acquisition to the projects which are really, struggling at a planning stage. We see that there is an overhang of these inefficiencies when it comes to project execution. These are areas definitely which are of concern, whether it is, a large transmission line being laid, or a large road project being made, or let's say, the larger iconic port and the airport projects, which are coming up. I think we have a lot to learn from some of these matured economies in terms of absorbing these pre-construction risks.
So, with all these large infrastructure projects, there is one thing which is coming up in a lot of conversation is with respect to the green aspect of it, with the air quality being where it is. What do you think the government is doing to ensure that the air quality remains good for us?
Well, as far as the budget is concerned, Santosh, we've had some large announcements that were made specifically in the renewable space. And one can also cover, what are the initiatives taken over the last 1 year, and, how things have panned out over the last 10 years or so. As far as the budget is concerned, I think there were two announcements, if I remember clearly, giving the infrastructure status to the charging infra and the green hydrogen segments, which is a very refreshing initiative because there's a huge capacity building that one is expecting in both these segments. Apart from this, there is also a CCUS allocation where I think there is a 4 to 5,000 crore allocated basically for the carbon capture for some of these industries as a part of the infrastructure, as a part of the announcement that the AFM made. Apart from this, I think in the last 1 year, we've also seen record capacity addition, both in terms of solar as well as the wind capacities. To add to this further, I think there is a huge amount of capacity which has been added also on the manufacturing side, which makes the whole ecosystem more sustainable when it comes to renewables. So, as you are aware, we also, as a part of our coverage, have a coverage on the manufacturing, the aspect of solar cell manufacturing and module manufacturing. There's a huge amount of capacity which has been built now. Ideally, this should have been built much earlier. But with the kind of generation targets, steep generation targets that we have taken in the renewable space, I think it was very, very important that we back it up with a huge manufacturing capacity to sustain that kind of generation targets. As we speak, large part of the dependence actually is on countries like China, where we are sourcing, these solar panels and cells, etc. But going forward, I think this is slated to change. We will have a lot of these capacities getting manufactured within India itself.
Excellent. So finally, with for investment managers and wealth managers, does it open a array of more products which can be offered to customers, which can be offered as investors actually in the country itself?
Certainly, yes. I think the advent of the InvITs and the REITs, which is a very, very relevant product for the wealth managers to distribute it amongst the HNIs and the family offices. I think it is also worthwhile to mention here that while we have a huge expansion of financial institutions and the banks to fund these projects, there are some developers and there will be some projects which will not really meet the requirements typically coming from a bank or from a private equity fund. And that corpus is where I think the wealth managers can play a very important role in terms of latching on to some of these family offices who have an appetite to invest on in these projects or in these renewable themes. As you are aware, most of the investments that you would make in this sector, whether it is cutting across in the typical infrastructure, transportation, logistics, or in the renewable space, will fetch you an annuity kind of return, and it will pan out over a longer period of time. So typically, if your clients are looking at sustained kind of annuity returns over the next 10 to 15 years, infrastructure is the sector to invest.
With that, we come to the end of this conversation. Thanks a lot, Sandeep. It was really good that we could understand what the budget had, especially with respect to infrastructure for us. Thanks a lot.